Now, you may have thought these unusual circumstances meant that you wouldn't have to sit through a sermon this morning. I hate to tell you you're wrong, because there are just a few thoughts that I'd like to share with you. Today's readings invite us to consider the quest for wisdom. First, in the reading that Michael gave to us, we encountered King Solomon, who rather than ask for wealth or power, first asked God for wisdom. God was pleased with this request, and in what is, frankly, a rather a Trumpian response, told Solomon that he would be given a wise and discerning mind. No one like you has been before you, and no one like you shall arise after you. Very Donald Trump, don't you think? Then in our gospel reading, after that series of short parables about the diligent search for the kingdom, Jesus teaches his disciples with a rather enigmatic phrase. He says, every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like the master of a household who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old. Jesus is telling his disciples that the wise teacher of faith will use the best of the old knowledge and combine it with the new in the task of bringing the kingdom to pass. Wisdom requires the acquisition and then the wise use of knowledge, does it not? A key theme of Matthew's Gospel is that Jesus is the living, breathing personification of divine wisdom. The Hebrew Bible, what we call the Old Testament, often sings hymns of praise to divine wisdom. And often wisdom is even given a personality, usually a feminine personality. Wisdom is she in the pages of the Hebrew Bible. Take, for example, these lines from the first chapter of the book of Proverbs. Wisdom cries out in the street. In the squares she raises her voice. How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? How long will scoffers delight in their scoffing and fools hate knowledge? I find those lines, well, actually quite encouraging. They remind me that teachers and writers throughout the ages have always despaired of how the mind of the common man seems to work, just like I often do. Human beings have always been subject to spin and fake news, and they've always acted on instinct rather than fact. Fools have always hated knowledge, and they've always scoffed at those who do put in the hard work to find out what is true and good and right. Oh, what do these scientists know? I'll believe the newspapers instead. Theologians? Pah! 4.5 centuries before Jesus, there was a famous man in Greece called Plato. He was a philosopher, a word made up of 2 Greek words, philia, meaning love, and sophia, meaning wisdom. A philosopher, then, is somebody who just loves wisdom. Plato had a tremendous impact in his own time and in the centuries afterwards. His thinking was widely known and often quoted. I'd be extremely surprised if Jesus had never heard of Plato. It would be like us never having heard of Shakespeare. Plato offered the world a simple metaphor for the accumulation of wisdom. It was the metaphor of a cave. Imagine, he said, that you were born in a cave facing the wall, and that this is the only life you've ever known. On the wall of the cave in front of you are shadows of things that you believed were real. Trees, houses, people. This is your whole life. A tree, to you, was just a shadow of a tree. A house was just a shadow of a house. Imagine then, said Plato, that one day something made you turn round. And to your surprise, you found that there were people standing behind you, holding up wooden silhouettes of trees, houses, and people, and waving them about in front of the light. Suddenly, your eyes have been opened. You realise that there is a cause of the shadows that you've seen on the wall in front of you. Your whole worldview has shifted. Then, said Plato, imagine that you notice the daylight shining behind the people who are holding up the silhouettes. Your inquiring mind has been awakened, and so you make your way to the entrance of the cave, and then, stepping into the sunlight, you find out what a real tree looks like, a real house, and real people. That, Plato suggested, is the journey of wisdom, the willingness to go ever deeper and ever beyond what we appear to see in front of our eyes. You might be interested to know that Plato's cave, this analogy, this metaphor, is the reason why many nativity scenes are shown in a cave. Jesus is shown as the divine light, the divine wisdom bursting out of the cave of human ignorance and lazy thinking. The cave, suggested Plato, is a metaphor for the quest for wisdom on which we're all invited. It's a way of life which anyone can follow. It's a prize worth selling everything you own to possess, like the pearl of great price or the treasure hidden in the field of Jesus' parables. But in those parables, I hear you ask, I think I do. In those parables, isn't Jesus talking about the kingdom of heaven, not wisdom per se? Well, yes. But the kingdom of heaven is first and foremost a place in which divine wisdom reigns supreme. It is divine wisdom, for example, which teaches us that in giving things away, we actually accumulate wealth. Or, as I said a few weeks ago in the Corona Chronicle, true wealth is what you find you have left when all your possessions have been taken away. I'll say that again because it's worth thinking about. True wealth is what you find you have left when all your possessions have been taken away. It is divine wisdom which teaches us that forgiveness is the only way to deal with hatred. It's divine wisdom that teaches us that God's voice is often heard best in silence. It's divine wisdom that teaches us that servants make the best leaders. It's divine wisdom which gives us a king who has a cross as his throne. You see, as I've said many times before, the kingdom of heaven is an upside-down place. There's almost nothing in the kingdom which feels normal to a society that values hatred, greed, fake news, celebrity, and worldly power. That's why it's such a hard message to communicate to the world. Wisdom cries out in the street. In the squares she raises her voice. How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? How long will scoffers delight in their scoffing and fools hate knowledge? Amen. Amen. If you are able, I invite